Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us today for How Are Things Really Going in Cybersecurity? There's special emphasis on the word really there because this is sort of an introspective look on the cybersecurity industry, somewhat of a state of the union. My name is Mike Andrews. My company is Yastis Cybersecurity Consulting here in Las Vegas. Here once again with Karina Clever of Clever Compliance. And we're happy to be welcomed by guest Christian Espinosa, who's the founder and CEO of Blue Goat Cyber, where they help medtech companies secure their devices. He has about over 30 years of experience in this industry. He's a prior Air Force veteran. He's competed in, I believe, 24 Ironman triathlons, and he's the author of the book, The Smartest Person in the Room, which is how I came across him when someone I know referred me to the book, which I really liked. Just a couple of announcements before I pass it over to them. First one, if you have any questions or comments as we're going, please just drop it in the comments section. If we can't get to it live, we'll be sure to get to it shortly after. And then the second one, if you haven't checked out the GRC Room YouTube channel, please stop by, check it out at the GRC Room on YouTube, where we have all the prior webinars. We'll have this webinar, we have a bunch of clips, and we're gonna be adding a bunch more content soon. So without further ado, let me pass it over to Karina for a brief introduction, and then we'll learn more about Christian.
Thank you, Mike. So excited for this one, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm Karina Clever of Clever Compliance. We are a boutique tool agnostic, GRC principled service provider. We have a lot of service offerings, namely we're known for compliance management as a service for folks who don't want to really stand up their own GRC programs for whatever reason, or they want to augment it. A favorite service offering these days is alleviation of toolard, which happens when you have way more platforms than you really ever need, and there's a lot of redundancy. So that amongst some of other favorites like vendor management. So definitely excited to welcome Christian to the show. So Christian, why don't we get straight into some of these questions? What motivated you to write The Smartest Person in the Room?
I wrote that book when I had my first cybersecurity company because I realized 99% of the problems I had on my company were because my team didn't have emotional intelligence. So the book is my contribution to the industry to try to infuse some people skills or emotional intelligence into a highly rationally intelligent industry, because I feel like most of the problems we have in the industry are because people want to be smarter than other people in cybersecurity. They want to talk over their head. They want to have all these acronyms. They don't meet people where they are. They don't meet clients where they are. So I that's my attempt to fix the industry, because I almost wanted to get out of the industry before I wrote that book.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had a webinar, I think it was April, with Lester Chang, who's a kind of like communication expert in this area, and we talked all about those things. We get technical all the time, but it often does come down to just communication. So at Blue Goat Cyber, your focus is medtech devices, helping companies secure them. And this is one of the few areas in cybersecurity where it actually can and maybe sometimes does mean life or death. How did that become your primary point of focus in the industry?
In my first company, my first cybersecurity company, we did medical device cybersecurity, but it wasn't the main focus. It was like part of what we did. We did a bunch of other things. And I sold that company in 2020 to a publicly traded company. While I was working at the publicly traded company, I developed 6 blood clots in my left leg and almost died. So thanks to a medical device, I'm still here. And I often think what the consequences would have been if that device was recalled, or if it gave a misdiagnosis. The consequences to me would have been, I would be dead. So I thought that was the universe telling me to focus on medtech cybersecurity. So I spun off the division from the parent company and started Blue Goat Cyber to focus purely on medical device cybersecurity.
Wow, that's so cool. It's like in the book, Start With Why. Business should be based on having a strong why, and that's incredible. Yeah. So now we're going to get into a bunch of questions. We're going to bounce it back and forth between Christian and Karina, and maybe I'll add something if I rarely have something interesting or useful to say. The first one, Christian touched on this a lot in his book, I think better than most people I've heard. But Christian, Do you think the typical small and medium-sized business is prepared to handle the cyber threats of today?
The short answer is no. I don't think so. And I can understand why. It's cybersecurity is not really top of mind for most people, especially with a small business. You're trying to make the business successful, and cybersecurity is an expense. And then, like I talked about in my book, most cybersecurity professionals like overly complicate cybersecurity. So as a small business owner, you don't know where to begin. And it's important as a cybersecurity consultant or someone in our industry to meet the business where they are. They don't need 100 controls. They may only need to do 5 of them correctly, but I feel like that is a big problem in our industry. We tend to overly complicate things and tell people to do everything on a checklist versus the things that actually matter in a um, prioritized manner based on risk.
Yeah, that's a great point. In your book, you position that really well in talking about, it seemed kind of like offense versus defense, with the business side and then the cyber threat actors. Karina, what do you think about this one?
So that's music to my ears because I literally walk around nonstop explaining that, you know, regulations and frameworks are really made to be, they're intentionally ethereally written, they're intentionally vague, they're intentionally nebulous because they're supposed to be broadly applicable. They're supposed to apply across organizations, across maturities, across some company sizes, many times across industries, right? And so there's a few niches, of course, like you see HIPAA aligned to high trust very closely, right? You have a law and then you have a framework, so a regulation and a framework. So there's complements, but then there are a lot of companies who use fintech outside of the HIPAA requirements, right? So although there are some inclinations for regulations and frameworks, so of course 800 171, CMMC, very specific requirements on fulfillment there, but a lot of it is sometimes intentionally overwhelming and delivered to us in a way that is very fear-based. I hate to say it. And because we get so overwhelmed from the fear of going to jail or being penalized, we're like, we'll do nothing. We'll go get a cyber insurance policy. They'll go get underwritten for a cyber insurance policy by checking the box and hitting yes on everything. But when push comes to shove and there might be a time for payout, I mean, some of the numbers I've heard are upwards of 85%. Cyber insurance policies aren't paying out, right? Mm-hmm. And 60% of companies actually, this is a very well-floated statistics, don't even make it after an initial cyber attack breach if you're an SMB. So it's a little tragic that we're so focused on this really big fat monster that doesn't even really need to be a monster in the room. It is just about kind of chipping away at some best practice controls that you can start with in your own space for your own existing operations and leveraging that guidance, kind of like a checklist, kind of like a recommended set of practices. And so Christian, I'm just so happy to hear that you're also kind of reinforcing the same message.
Yeah, that was really interesting, the part about the cyber insurance. For a while, I was trying to do outreach to like cyber insurance companies and brokers saying, hey, why don't we work together? I'll help your customers actually figure this stuff out. So that way, when they get their policies, the stuff is accurate. And they acted like they hated me, and I didn't understand why. And then I went to lunch with one, and they kind of explained it, that they kind of benefit when the answers are wrong, so they could just deny the claim later, which is unfortunate. But Christian, next question for you. So a lot of companies, whether it's on the cybersecurity side or the compliance side, are using AI, different automation platforms to augment their team and do things quicker. Do you think companies are using automation enough? Do you think sometimes it goes too far? Like, how do you find the right balance?
I think automation and AI are certainly valuable, but they're only valuable if you actually understand the process manually first and do the basics. I think a lot of organizations try to implement AI too soon when they don't understand what the basics are. And it becomes a problem. Like with a small business, some of the basic things are like multi-factor authentication, patching, privilege management. having AI enabled to automate a firewall or rules or things like that, it doesn't make any sense unless you've done those basic things. And then even in my industry in med tech, people are using AI prematurely as well. There was a case that's actively going on now where a wellness application has AI as part of it and is supposed to help counsel people. And a patient was being counseled by this AI application, and the AI application basically told the patient, this patient was suicidal, to go ahead and kill themselves, and the patient killed themselves. So the obviously the company's being sued, but again we think AI is going to solve all of our problems, but we're not really using it in the appropriate manner. I think we don't understand all the ramifications with AI either.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like if we're replacing people with AI, we have to realize that this is still our presence. If people go on our website, they're in a chat box with AI. You can't come back later and say, "Oh, well, that was just a robot." That's just AI. That's not our company. It is your company. Karina, how do you look at this one?
So this is really frustrating because we all want it, right? We all want to adopt it, and we all want to believe the magic and I always go back to, when the internet first started, and I was around, and I had a 35-year career in IT now. When the internet first started, it was very authoritarian. It was very the real thing. It was you didn't have to get on the bus to get to the library and wait till Monday during working hours to get to the encyclopedia if you didn't have one at home, right? I mean, it was this very convenient, it was just fantastic to have this resource. And when it first came out, we all truly, truly believed that everything it said was right. And then it took us a little bit of time to figure out it wasn't. But now many AI models are trained on that aggregate data that's available basically in the internet. And the problem with that is that variance of fault is also present. And now you add things like AI is a people pleaser. It's going to tell you what you want to hear. So if you're telling it that you're suicidal, okay, right? If you're telling it that you're ugly, okay. If you're a woman and you have insecurities and you're telling it that boys must be better than you, okay, because AI is a people pleaser, right? Amongst other characteristics, and so treating that AI environment in your company like it's a vendor. Where's my data? How are you handling it? NIST V2 basics, folks, in that new governed band: transportation, storage, processing. Figure out with that vendor, like you would with any other vendor, if there's any sort of proprietary information, where is that data being stored? How are you handling it? What are your controls around your vendor's vendor if that data is passing downstream? And also, are you providing guidance for your current workers, contractors, temp staff, employees, whoever they may be, and the right parameters to say, here's the stuff you never ever put in AI, right? Identifiable information, health information. The HHS breach, OCR breach report, folks, 90% of the US population has an active investigation going on right now against it. So this isn't the breach that happened 7 years ago. There was a 2-year investigation and the breach closed 5 years ago. This is today. There's over 300 million individuals involved. These are your kids, your brothers and sisters and moms and dads and aunties. And this is 90% of the US population has an active investigation going on with the HHS OCR right now on personal health information. And it is such a violation that we need to be really careful, not only as consumers, but as users of these tools and as contributors of these tools and as companies who house data of this type, talk about the controls that we have around that data.
So Karina, you brought up the Change Healthcare incident. We've been seeing a big increase in protected health information related breaches. Why do you think that is?
We've overcomplicated our environments. We have too many tools that have different UIs. They get a lot of source data the same way. We have humans who come in and they're like, okay, Here's swivel chair. Here's tool 2 and 4 and 7 and 9 and 14. Every single one of these tools will go send you an email. So you go and have a nice time figuring out which one is most important, right? That's from the technician perspective. It's an unfortunate situation. We have completely lost the art of data classification in our industry. So my most important data needs a very different level of encryption and storage and protection and access control and API, including APIs, right? API is access, logical, physical, and system to system access versus my publicly available data. And why am I encrypting publicly available data instead of purging it in 2 weeks? Now, the discipline that's required to do the data classification, the data mapping, the data structuring, very difficult. No one wants to do it. Right? And there's a magical tool out there with a power on and off switch, and it's got to do it for me, is what we're thinking. But what's happening is we're layering on so many complexities, we're completely losing track of where our data is, and we're making a lot of assumptions. Nobody likes to read contracts. Contracts get passed on from IT to legal potentially, or some other groups. It's very hard to trace and ask those specific questions. So that's what I always implore everyone to do. Ask your vendors what happens to your data. How is that data handled? And now start making controls around that answer, whatever that answer is.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Christian, you know the medical industry better than most, since you work on medtech devices so often. What do you think is causing all these data breaches in that field?
Well, we work on medical devices. The primary context is if somebody hacks into the device, can we harm a patient or give a misdiagnosis? Like a surgical robot, that's doing surgery on someone's spine, you could paralyze the patient. So we look at the harm to patient. As far as PHI, I agree with what Karina said. It's the basics are being skipped. My organization, the last one I sold, we did penetration testing for hospitals. And there was not a single healthcare provider that we did not give full access to everything. And it was basically consistent. It was that the fundamentals were skipped. In fact, we consider, from a medical device perspective, hospital environments hostile. We know that device, they're already compromised, and that medical device is going to be tried to be compromised. It's basically the basics are skipped. It's things as simple as the HVAC system has a default password. You know, it's very simple things, and we try to layer on all these complexities, which don't add any value until you've done the top 5 things well. And from my perspective, with HIPAA and cybersecurity in general, we try to do 100 things, and we do all of them basically half-assed versus do the top 5 100%, which would reduce the risk greatly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Back in the day when I was doing like networking and different IT stuff, I noticed things were a lot more casual in the hospital environment than the other locations. And I would even ask some people, and they basically said like, "Oh, we got a lot going on. You know, we got to be quick. It's all about the patients." Yes, it is all about the patients, but you can do 2 things at once, and that's the patient's data. So we should be securing it. The next question for you first, Christian, is what do you think of the typical relationship between business leaders and the leaders in cybersecurity? Do you see them working well together? Is there friction? And what can we do about that?
The typical relationship is not ideal. I wouldn't necessarily want to separate a business leader from a cybersecurity leader. If you're a cybersecurity leader like a CISO in a company, you should be a, quote, business leader as well.
Yeah,
so you should speak in terms of reducing the risk to the business, not with a bunch of cybersecurity jargon. And I think this is the biggest problem we have in cybersecurity, which is partly why I wrote my book, is we like to talk in terms of cybersecurity versus in terms of business and risk. Cybersecurity, like nobody wants to hear you talk about, you know, the next generation firewall or the NIDS or the HIDS or the endpoint security. They want to hear like what this does to the business and how it affects the business. But we get too caught up in cybersecurity just talking in acronyms and things that don't resonate from a business perspective. So I think if you are that cybersecurity leader, you should understand your role is to reduce the risk for the business, and you should be able to articulate that in a way where you do get that budget and people understand what you're talking about versus just talking over people's head and with a bunch of cybersecurity jargon. Because from my experience, as soon as people start talking about cybersecurity stuff, everyone tunes out unless it relates to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Karina, what do you think about this, and how do you approach this sort of thing?
So I think it comes down to the human again, right? So the folks in the decision-making capacity, and potentially even the folks who have the pocketbook control of the money, right? Many of them want to do the right thing, but they don't know what to ask for. Right. And so the hierarchical pyramid that we have in a lot of our organizations, where you have the bosses at the top, they have a lot of people that work for them that want to keep their jobs. So they're also kind of yes men sometimes, or yes women, where they want to make their leadership feel comfortable. And it turns into this almost sideswipe situation every single time something goes bad, because you can have the dashboards and you can have the metrics and you can have the all of the things that you're doing, and all of those things are incredibly valuable and they're very, very good things, but it's hard to see when something comes at you from the side. and what you don't know in that leadership position is what you're even asking for. Is everything secure? Sure. Do you need more money? Yeah. What are you going to spend the money on? Well, more stuff. And then you start throwing the acronyms out, and the people, glazes over people's heads, and they don't know the difference, right? And so, to me, this is where governance comes in. Those are my optics, right? So when you have an overlay of GRC on top of every single one of those competency areas, you have GRC on top of incident, on top of change, on top of vulnerability management and access controls and self audits. And when you have all these core competency areas across the company, HR and finance, right? Now you have that layer of GRC that actually is your measurement of the success of the controls in those competency areas, that you can now measure and look to see what's failing and what's working. And it's not necessarily tool-based, which we in IT believe that everything is tool-based and the solution to everything is a tool. But I really think that true governance is about aligning to your true operations and looking at it from that governance perspective. Are you satisfying the controls that relate to your actual operations? And risk is not another download of ethereal controls that might not have anything to do. Risk is, and those are important as a checklist, but the risk I really want to know about are my failed controls in my actual operations, and how do I actually mitigate the controls that I should have in my true operations, right? So when those business leaders can consistently look at a GRC doc, right, that says, here's how my GRC program is doing across my entire company, I think they'd be a little bit better equipped to ask the right questions for my true operations, opposed to having this perpetual disconnect between the different functional groups. And everybody wants to be polite, and no one wants to make some other guy promise to do work on behalf of their department. I mean, it's this constant disconnect. And if there's a baseline way to highlight the business requirements, to do the BIAs, to see how the IT department actually satisfies that, and create those service offerings and measure it with GRC, it really helps your true operations of your company. Your entire company flows better. It's not a nuisance. It actually is an enabler to better business.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's important to tie, when communicating with the other business leaders, it's important to speak in terms of potential money gained or time saved or money lost, because that's what business is about. You're either making money or you're losing money. And if you position cybersecurity and compliance, GRC, like it's this other thing that it is something for the IT person to think about, and you're in the meetings with leadership and like half of them are on their phones or going, taking a break to go get coffee, something's wrong. And it's not on the business leader side, because if done right, those other business leaders will stay in the room and they'll be interested. So sometimes, we can't look at the other party when we think that communication is not working, we need to look internally. But the next topic I wanted to talk about is cybersecurity hiring, cybersecurity staffing. It's such a weird issue in cybersecurity. And I think it started with some of these industry associations that years ago started saying, oh, we have 4 or 5 million people, 4 or 5 million job openings. Because when you do that, then people start choosing that sort of degree program. We've seen that in nursing for many years. Oh, we had a nursing shortage. Okay, we got a bunch of people in nursing school because people want to work in a field where there's abundance of opportunity. Yet a bunch of the students I mentor, they're well qualified. They have a nice master's degree, some certifications, and it's not that easy. Persistence does get them to where they need to be. But Christian, what do you think of the cybersecurity hiring and staffing right now? What's going on?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. Number one, I think the skills gap is BS. Like literally, if we just posted a job on LinkedIn and we had like 800 applicants in like 4 minutes, and these are really good applicants. So I don't understand where the skills gap is coming from. Maybe like you said, Mike, they're trying to get more people in the industry, but I have not experienced a skill gap with my organization. No matter what job we post, we have many hundreds of qualified applicants immediately. I also don't think certifications matter or degrees matter. I used to teach cybersecurity in college at the master's level, and I had people that just wanted to check a box and have a degree that didn't actually care about the penetration testing course. And I'd get pushback because they would be like, you're asking me to actually do a penetration test. Yeah, you're in a master's program in a master's level penetration testing course, which means you're supposed to demonstrate mastery over the topic. And my students would get upset because I asked them to do practical penetration testing exercises. They didn't want to do it. So they just want to check a box. And I think we've come to this point in our industry where people want certifications and degrees, but the reality is they don't matter. And like I said before, I think the skills gap is, I don't know where it came from. I think somebody just made it up and everybody just latched onto it. But I've never experienced a skills gap.
Yeah. The main organization that comes to mind, I won't say their name, they sell certifications. So, if you ask me where they come from, and they're in a good organization, I've been involved with them here and there. But if you're a pizza restaurant, you're going to say, yeah, pizza's great to eat. Why would you say your own thing is bad? It's like in cybersecurity. Yeah, there's a lot of potential. Karina, what do you think about this?
I also have a lot of opinions, of course. So look, I think some of the baseline certification requirements that companies established to bring people in were because they needed to understand they needed to bring people in that potentially had some level of baseline for the things that they wanted them to do, right? And so I wouldn't hire the pizza guy to go sit in a knock. So how do I vet that? I vet it with a cert, more than likely. I've had many people report to me, and this is just almost a formality to try to get close to the target that I'm trying to hire. Now, I've hired a lot of people with certifications who are completely useless humans. I hate to say it this way, but they have rows and rows of certifications behind their names, and you're sitting there and you're like, what do you do? It's just ridiculous. So certifications or no certifications, again, up to the human to make it their own, right? And work. Now, that's the first point. That's the baseline point. I think that our job descriptions, now again, remember the swivel chair, the budget that you've got to sign by the end of the year. You got to bring a tool in. You got a budget or you're going to lose it for next year. So you sign a tool. It's an on-off switch. Our IT world is built on tools. Look at Black Hat. Look at RSA. In RSA, we had like puppies and goats, on the expo hall last year in San Francisco this last year. It's like they have, they're doing anything to sign that deal. So now we're incentivized as an industry to get another tool and another tool and another tool and another tool. So now we have these stacked tools. So now what do we have to do? Well, we have to manage them. We have to have people who know how to work these tools. So now this job description has not only the requirement of that cert, but now an added requirement. And the added requirement is, do you know how to use this particular tool? Now, there's probably too many tools, right? Too large, but nobody's talking about that. People are talking about on the job description, I've got the requirement for you to use a particular tool, even though this tool is pretty much identical to the tool right next to it. And so people are locking in the requirement that is very tool specific instead of human specific. I always say hire for character, hire for learning capability, hire for problem solving, never hire for the cert or the credentialing, because that might be painful in the end. But let's not try to limit ourselves as an industry to a specific set of a few acronym letters, and try to figure out how to make our companies work better with everybody involved, right? It's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've always thought the experience is the most important thing, yet I still did the degree and certification stuff because I didn't want to get beat out by everyone when people, like HR teams were just looking like, oh, there's the ISSP, they don't have that.
Can I add one more thing? I'm sorry. Very recently, I was at a networking event in my area. I'm out of Westlake Village, California, and was following two cybersecurity students pretty closely. Well, a big group, but out of that big group, there were two people who kept trying to find work, couldn't find work. And they went and got welding degrees. They're booked 3 years out and they make $250,000. And they're like, while I'm young and I can stand the heat and be outside, I'm good. They actually got a van. The initial conversation started because I live in a van sometimes in front of client sites. And they're like, what kind of a van? We want to get a van and we wanted to have 2 beds and this whole thing because we want to go to the job site and just sleep there. So they also have no rent. So people start figuring out creative ways. And the tragedy for me in this story, I'm very, very happy for them. But the tragedy for me in this story is we are losing incredibly wonderful people out of this industry because of the way that we've created this bureaucracy to not allow anyone to progress forward. And it is absolutely just heartbreaking because we're losing some great people out of this industry.
Well, I think it depends, that bureaucracy you're referring to, like what type of organizations you want to work for. Like if you want to work for the DoD, a contracting organization, obviously you have to have Security Plus or CISSP or these things. But if you choose like a smaller organizations, there's less bureaucracy. Like my organization, we have like 25 people, and I don't have an HR department that says you have to have a CISSP or Security Plus. And I also know I don't really care about those things because I have worked with lots of CISSPs that don't actually know anything. Same thing with Security Plus, because most of these exams are just multiple choice. They're not actually practical, and there's a pretty big disconnect from reality from my experience with certifications as well.
So, Christian, we've already talked a good bit about degrees and certifications, but you talked about the high number of resumes that were submitted. So say we're in a world where everyone listens to exactly what you said, and then every single resume that you got had a high school diploma and no certs listed. We may not want that either. So if you're talking to a student that's interested in cybersecurity and they're saying, Christian, guide me with all your expertise, what should I do in terms of degree programs and certifications? What would you say to that?
Well, that's a pretty open-ended question. I think the first thing is, what do you want to do in cybersecurity? Everyone says, I want to break into cybersecurity. Like, what does that mean? Cybersecurity is a massive topic. So if somebody wants to apply for a job and I have a penetration testing job against hardware, then I would like to see that is what they want to do with their career. And they've demonstrated, like they've taken a course or done something that aligns with that specific thing they want to do, versus a general cybersecurity certification. And some of the best people on my team knew they wanted to do penetration testing. They went after the OSCP, which is a practical exam, and their focus was penetration testing. So they went after the certified bug bounty hunter exam as well. But they had a lot of clarity on what they wanted to do, and they took steps in that direction, which is what I value. If someone just wants to get into cybersecurity, that doesn't mean anything to me. Like if I have a job specific to penetration testing, or let's say digital forensics, I want to see somebody that is passionate and has taken a few steps in that direction. And I think the biggest problem we have in the industry is a lot of people want to, as they say, break into cybersecurity, but to me that doesn't mean anything. Like, what does it actually mean? What do you want to do? Do you want to work in a SOC? Do you want to do pen testing? Do you want to do digital forensics? Do you want to do GRC? These are all very different skill sets. And I appreciate when somebody has clarity on what they specifically want to do, and they can demonstrate that clarity in an initial conversation or an initial resume.
Yeah, that's a great point. I as part of being on the UNLV Cybersecurity Advisory Board, we all mentor like between 4 and 6 people at a time. And that's like the first discussion pretty much is, what do you want to do in cybersecurity? Do you want to do white collar? Do you want to be hands on keyboard? You got to figure that out, because then that'll guide everything else. Because sometimes you see people say, oh, I just want to get in the door. I'll do whatever comes at me first. And then before you know it, you've been doing it for 8 years and you hate it. And you have all these certifications and not good. So Karina, if you're talking to a student about these things, degrees and certs, what would you say?
I kind of say the same thing. I mean, I would say, it's kind of like, either if your parents sent you or you send your kids to the painting class and then the piano class and then the violin class and then the chess class and then the dancing class and then you try these things, right? You try these things because somewhere in there you're like gonna land on something that you enjoy, that you like, that you want to spend your time doing, right? And I think that's just a process of kind of finding our natural inclination, because some people are great at some things and not great at other things, and that's perfectly normal. And so I think I want to get into cybersecurity it's such a big wide ocean, right? To try those different things. I think that optimally that's what schooling should be for. We have had people on our team where, I toot the GRC horn whenever I can. I toot the GRC horn to my friends that have nothing to do with GRC at a red light, right? I mean, I'll toot GRC anytime. But, we've had people on our team who I'll toot GRC to them and they'll say, tried it, but I want to do this other thing. And all I can do is respect them for that, because now at least I understand that they have GRC principles in place and they can go to that other thing and kind of look at it a little bit differently and structure it in a way that it can be monitored from a GRC perspective a little bit differently. So I think that knowing what you want is right on. I also think trying different things in a schooling capacity, not in an employer capacity, but in a schooling capacity, and getting out there and signing yourself up for different things is a great thing, so you can continue to try different things, and just refining that skill, because you can only get better and better and better at it, or you may get bored with it, like Mike, like you said, and then you want to go try the next thing, and that's a perfectly normal evolution of any career, I think.
Yeah, and a big part of that, it's look at the pay of it. Like sometimes you see people, they start in a lower paying area of cybersecurity, and then someone sends them, or they see on LinkedIn like a salary chart, and they're like, oh, that's the highest one. Kind of like in medicine, when they're like, oh, anesthesiologist is way up there. Like if you want to make top dollar, think about that earlier rather than later, and then that'll guide you as you figure out which area you want to be in. But a big area of this, as Christian's book, The Smartest Person in the Room, highlights so well, is the communication aspect, personal skills. So Christian, what can we do from a people skill perspective if we want to thrive in cybersecurity?
Well, I think, I think I said this in the book, that technical skills are finite skills and people skills are infinite skills. So people skills will help you. And for some reason in our industry and cybersecurity, there's this idea that you don't have to have people skills. I can just be hands on keyboard and not interact with anybody. But then people get frustrated when somebody less technical gets promoted. And they're often promoted because they can communicate better or get along with their teammates better. So this is the challenge I tried to solve in my book is, I had people in my first company that didn't want to develop people skills, and I had to let them go ultimately because it was causing problems. But I am always perplexed by what is the resistance to learning people skills. Like, it would make your life better, not just at work, with your family, with your children, with everybody, right? So there's this weird resistance. So I hire for people skills above technical skills. So we talked about the skills shortage earlier and all that. I think the bigger skills shortage today, as we've evolved with phones and cell phones and nobody talking to each other, is there's less humans with people skills today than there used to be like 10 years ago. So I think that is a bigger skills gap now than the actual technical skills.
That's a good point. Karina, what do you think about this?
I'm gonna only echo that, right? Because working with other people, at the end of the day, the computers do what we tell it to do, right? And so if you don't have the capacity to make that decision in a team, make that decision for the benefit of the company, make that decision in a way where no one gets angry, make that decision in a way that's accountable, then it's a lost cause. I mean, it's not. I think the acceptance comes from the odd stereotype of, the stoner sitting in his basement at 2:30 in the morning and coming up with amazing architectural, code that, hacks some weird, really cool, super secret place and they get some cool bounty. I mean, there's something sexy about that, right? Where you're kind of like, wow, are you that crazy cool guy? And there's this mystique about those kinds of people. And those kinds of people are, I mean, I've literally had to, on the spot, disqualify candidates who've come to me that obviously haven't showered in a month. I mean, right? I mean, the fact that could even happen is just blows my mind, but it happens, right? And so, in some weird kind of hacking world, that's an acceptable thing and that's normal. And we associate those kinds of people with being the most brilliant solutionist to, our technical problems. And it's kind of like, you got to put up with them and accept them for what they are and try to navigate around their communication gaps if they have any. And I'm broadly generalizing, please, I don't want to offend anyone. So I want to make sure that this isn't a sort of stereotype, but it is something that exists in our industry. And so I think that improving everyone's capacity to just communicate and coming back down to that person, it's always the person. It's always about the person. It's always about the person deciding on the budget. It's the person deciding on the tool. It's always the person deciding on how to handle a situation, whether they panic, whether they lash out, whether they give it a group hug, right? Whether they make someone feel bad, or whether it's a backhanded compliment, whether they're passive aggressive. I've known quite a few narcissists in my life, right? So I mean, and we're like, I am a woman in a man's world that happens to be IT, and so I experience it a lot. So it's very it's very unfortunate, but it is a wonderful kind of call to action and encouragement for everyone, I think, to just be better, right? Be better, a better human and a better communicator and a better team builder, for sure.
Yeah, those are both made really good points. I think with people skills communication, there's a couple ways I look at it. One, you want people to be okay with being around you, because if they hate how you act, unless the benefits they're getting are astronomical, they're probably not going to want to do it long term. And then also, we have to know how to get people to say yes. Like, if we're in a GRC role and we technically maybe could contact the engineering team and then just say, do this by tomorrow. That might work for a while, but it's not going to be ideal. Instead, it pays to be able to say why something needs to be done, why it needs to be done by that point in time. And if it's easier for them to work with us and they understand why it benefits them, they'll want to do it more. But Christian, going back to what we started out with, how are businesses handling modern cyber threats? We talked about how things are going, but now I'd like to quickly talk about what can we do for the future? Look back and now we'll look forward. So what are the top things a small, medium-sized business can do to protect themselves against modern cyber threats?
I think it goes back to doing the basics and really understanding what the basics are. As we talked about AI and toolage, Karina's brought up toolage quite a bit. There's too many people skip the basics. The basics, if I'm a small to medium-sized business, the basics are multi-factor authentication. Have that on. Do patch management. Patch your operating system and your applications, because most cyber attacks take advantage of an unpatched system or something without multi-factor authentication. Manage your privileges. Not everybody needs to be an administrator. And then have processes in place, because one of the biggest cyber attacks today is, someone tries to pretend they're the CEO and ask you to pay this vendor or whatever. So if you have a process in place that if someone asks you to do something like that, you have a two-step process or something that would prevent that from happening. I think if people just did those basics, and I would agree with Karina's point as well, like know where your data is, your protected data, the data you want to protect, don't have it all over. If people would just do those things, we would have way less cybersecurity incidents. Like all the tools and the fancy stuff, that only matters if you've got the basics covered, which I just went over, 5 things to do that I consider basic, which from my experience, almost zero organizations have mastery over.
Yeah, that's a great one. We hear a lot about tools, and the way I look at tools is, if there's no way you can do something, then of course you consider a tool, because you can't just say, oh, well, we give up. Or if maybe it can save you like 50 or 60% of the time, then it's probably good to consider. But sometimes you see companies that they're using this tool, they're not sure what the benefit is. It might save them 5% of the time, but it adds to their threat surface area. So it's not really ideal. Karina, you have a lot of perspectives about tools. So if you could just give us some insight on how you look at tools in the broader context of SMBs and startups protecting against modern cyber threats. What do you think?
Grocery store example. What do you need? Pretend you're doing an RFP. Pretend you have nothing and you're doing an RFP. What are your requirements? Right? And now look at what you actually have. Which tools satisfy what you actually have? Now, grocery store. You go to the grocery store, you bring back every single one thing that they have in the entire grocery store. You haul it home. Now you have an issue with storage. The frozen stuff's going to go bad. You have an issue with too much money. Why'd you spend money on all that? It's going to go bad, right? So you can't use all of it. Maybe you even have allergies. Why'd you buy shrimp? I have shellfish allergies. I'd never buy shrimp. But you have to buy one of every single thing at the store. So now you have it in your house. Are you going to get sick? So if you look at your tool suite and reverse engineer your actual requirements for your actual true real business and your actual true real operations, regardless of what, the feature sets can be, and the cool things that you can do with that tool that you were able to do it for the last 3 years, but you never did because you don't have the bandwidth for it. You're spending money on it, right? It's a cool feature. Wouldn't it be nice for us to do that? But this is the data hoarding issue. This is the too much stuff in your closet issue, right? Get rid of the stuff you're not wearing anymore. Pretty basic. So, and we're doing it all the time. For some reason, we as an industry have grown to, well, maybe one day, 27 years from now, I might use this data. Would you? Really? So this is where the data classification comes in so important. So isolating that data that's most important to your business. If you're HIPAA, PHI. If you're PCI, PII. Where's your consumer data? Are you lining up your consumers to states? States have privacy fulfillment requirements. Do you know the age of your consumers? It's very, very important, right? I mean, are you identifying all of these identifiable pieces of information about your consumers, about your business? Have you logged what is your IP? So know that data and control that data. That is your most important golden egg. Yes, uh, data classification has downstream. Uh, how fast do I want to recover it? Right? How fast do I want to pay attention to it? So my incident management is going to say I pay more attention to this data versus that data. My access control, same thing. Right? And all of the things that Christian said. So just knowing where that data is, controlling the data the right way. And even if you start with write something on a napkin, for God's sakes, I mean, even if you come up with a keyword, one word, my family and my friends and my colleagues know I have one word. So if you call me and you say I'm in jail and I need $300,000 right away, I'll say, absolutely. What's the code word? And if you know my code word, I'll send it. Most of the times those calls stop right as soon as I ask for the code word. Right? Come up with one code word. It's not a hard thing. Don't even write it down. Just what's your favorite code word? Make it not something that's common and not your favorite animal name and not your whatever, right? Just come up with one code word for your team and your people so that when grandma gets a call from the grandson and says, Grandma, I'm in jail or I've been to the hospital. Oh my gosh, let me help you. What's the code word, sweetheart? Right.
Wow.
So just simple basic stuff like that can really help a long way with just doing some of the basic protections.
That's a lucrative code word to know if Karina can just send over 300K.
I know.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of what it is. So I can make the phone call to her.
We had like 960 people on this, well, RSVP for this webinar. If there's potential of Karina giving out 300K, we're going to get Joe Rogan-like numbers in the future.
Yes, exactly.
No, but that's really good information. You guys have both said it all. The big one is the foundational stuff like two-factor authentication. As we spoke about on a prior webinar with Garrett Grayjack of UAttest, identity lately is like upwards of 80% of all breaches, whether they're big or small. Even the advanced ones originate with an identity issue because the threat actor has to get into the system somehow. So identity is my big one. And also having a really good policy that people want to use. If you're having it just for the sake of having it and it's in a drawer waiting for the next audit, that's not good. You have a good policy and process documentation when people want to use it. They're asking, can you give us that link? Where is it? Or even other departments saying, hey, I heard you had some really good policy. You're good at writing this stuff. Can you help us out? We want to have an SOP guide in our section, but we're just not really good at writing it. So those are my two. You have something to add, Karina?
Yeah, I just want to say that policies are not for auditors, folks, please. Although policies were chastised as being auditor eye candy, it is really for the purpose of having your people be successful when they come into work. It is for the purpose of not relying on their tribal knowledge from their last gig to come in and muddle through what your operations may be and what may make them successful at your place and try to just wing it, right? It is not for, yes, auditors consume that data to understand your controls and how you're satisfying those controls. But documentation, policy, process, procedure, standard, template, work instruction, doesn't matter what you call it. Make it available for people in your company to be successful because you're giving them instructions. Wiki-sized, great. I used to actually have bonus associated incentives with documentation on my team. If you're not going to write instructions to go from one team to group to the other, that's going to impact your bonus. Our bonus was amazing. We could bring somebody net new from the street, sit them down, and they could work for 3 weeks just based on documentation, not ever talk to anybody because it was so thorough and so manageable and so auditable as well that it actually showed executable controls just in the documentation stack. And that's your opportunity to align to those regulations and frameworks that influence your company that are ethereally written. write those down at the bottom of that documentation and say, this document satisfies control blah, blah, blah from blah, blah, blah. And then right away, you have your evidence in place when you're executing on that control.
That's some good insight. Christian, since we got into policy and process documentation, what do you think about this? How does it go when you're working with clients in terms of the documentation?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm working to scale a business. So policies and procedures matter tremendously. Plus, in my industry, we have to have traceability. So if we do a test, there has to be a test case. There has to be evidence that it was done. So I'm a big fan of, and I don't even care about being audited. I just care about scaling my business and making sure we're doing what's right. So I'm a big fan and big proponent of standard operating procedures and having that traceability. So if we say we tested something, I can trace it actually back in case something ever does come up. We have an audit trail of our penetration test against a medical device, of our documentation, of our analysis of whatever that is. Because my industry is highly regulated with medical devices because the FDA in the United States regulates as highly. So I'm a big proponent of procedures and processes. And I never even thought about it from an audit perspective. I could care less, because I just feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, no, that's great insight. Well, that's all the questions we have. Thanks so much for joining us today, Christian. It's been an absolute pleasure. Can you tell the audience where they can find you if they'd like to connect, and also if you'd like to add what your business can do to help?
Yeah, I am on most social media. I think LinkedIn is probably the best place to connect with me. My company, Blue Goat Cyber, is bluegoatcyber.com, and we help medical device manufacturers bring their product to market in a secure manner by helping them put cybersecurity into the device from a design perspective, not try to bolt it on at the very end, which is unfortunately what most people try to do.
Yeah, thank you. Karina, if you could tell the audience where they could find you if they'd like to connect, and also what Clever Compliance can do to help.
Yes, so we work with companies of all sizes in all industries. We are tool agnostic, industry agnostic, size agnostic. We have a contact form on clevercompliance.com. Please follow us on LinkedIn. By design, that is our only social media platform. In closing, I really want to implore everyone to please, please, never, ever put pictures or videos of your children on a line. You are creating a digital signature for them they have not opted into. You are also opening them up for identity theft. Virgin Social Security numbers are very, very real things. The last thing you want to do is have your kid go apply to college and find out they're delinquent $300,000. We'll just use that round number on some snowmobiles that they didn't know that they bought 7 years ago when they were in 6th grade. So please make sure that they have the option to create that digital signature for themselves when they're ready. And I think it's just a privacy violation, and it really welcomes hackers, especially geofencing and all kinds of things. Please contact us if you have any questions about that. And also, we would love to help you. We are accepting new clients. Go ahead and give us a shout out and follow Clever Compliance on LinkedIn. Thank you, Christian, so much. It was such a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. So much good information. At Yastis, we focus a lot on assessments, like risk assessments, gap analysis, to help with both risk and compliance. And then we make enhancements. We do things like policy, help with your physical, technical, administrative security controls, do things like answer the questionnaires, whether you're asking someone else to do those questionnaires or you have to complete one to close a deal, things like that. We have a new plan called One Scalable Plan. It's pretty cool. Just took into account a bunch of feedback that we heard from hundreds of conversations, and just here to help if anyone needs anything. Our next event is going to be in mid-September. We have a fantastic guest and a hot topic that gets people fired up, both in cybersecurity and not in cybersecurity. And we'll be announcing it hopefully within a week, maybe 2 weeks. But That's all we have. If you're on the call, thanks so much for joining in. It's a Wednesday, it's kind of midday, and we know you have a lot of other things you can do and other places you could be. So thanks so much and have a great day.